Hi, Amy.
Hi there, Jen. How you going?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Great, thank you. You're in Mexico, I understand.
Yes, it's been interesting weather. I'm super Canadian, obviously super white, so the heat lately has been a little bit challenging. But yeah, and you're
Cool.
in. Remind me where you are.
So I'm in Queensland in Australia, so that's kind of the where the Great Barrier Reef is, all down the side is that's Queensland, and I sort of live central Queensland, so it's very tropical. So it's quite warm where I'm from. Although at the moment we're supposed to be going through El Nino, but it's been like the wettest year I think we've had in I don't know how long. So something's up with the climate, but it's nice to have like cooler, rainier days. We had a very steamy Christmas, so this is nice, yeah.
Steamy like romance steamy, or steamy like weather steamy?
Well, both, whichever way you like to look at it. I'm all for the
So
double entendre.
sorry.
All for the double, the double entendre, the double meaning.
And so, for those of us, those watching that don't know, Amy Andrews is a romance author, and I'm Jenn Wodtke, and I'm a orgasm and pleasure coach. So we thought we might have a lot to chit chat about.
I think we've got a fair bit of crossover.
Yeah. So I just read your novella, and forgive me if I have the name wrong. I believe it's The Trouble with the Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Red Bikini.
It's itsy bitsy teeny weeny red bikini trouble.
Sorry, I had that backwards. Which is a super, super fun novella. I love the characters like reconnecting, and the sex scene was super hot. So I'm kind of wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what your process is and like how you come up with the sex scenes and how you think realistic or fantastical sex should be in our literature.
Okay, well, that's a lot. So I guess I can maybe go back a little bit to the beginning when I first started to read romance when I was like 11, I suppose, sneaking off with my mum's Mills and Boone and like reading them under the covers and her saying, "Oh, I'm not sure you should be reading them at that age," because she read the red covered ones here in Australia. They had red covers, not the sexy ones. And I remember, and back then, you usually only got one point of view, which was the females. You didn't get the male point of view. But it was very clear, even though I wasn't really sure what was going on, particularly that the female main character, the heroine, was always having an amazing time with the hero, and he made sure she was having an amazing time. So that one, I guess, was quite kind of formative. It's very different to uh, literature, where oftentimes, women who um, have been portrayed as, kind of if they get what they want sexually, they kind of end up having to wear like a, scarlet letter around their neck or throw themselves under a train. Or I love how romance fiction like centers it centers a female point of view for a start, and it really centers women's pleasure. And it says it's okay to want sex, it's okay to like sex, it's okay to want to have good sex, it's okay to want to be treated, well, in whatever partnership you're in. And you should have this. You shouldn't have to throw yourself under a train or
Yeah,
be danced over with a spell letter around your neck just because
yeah.
you want to have sexual pleasure.
And women can also be the instigators too. And I find, I mean, I had the same experience growing up and reading. We had more Harlequin, reading Harlequin romances. I remember reading them like at the cabin on vacation.
Same
Um,
thing. Harlequin Mills
yeah,
and Boone are the same. Harlequin bought Mills and Boone in like the 70s, so they became one company. But yeah, we're reading the same literature, obviously.
yeah, yeah. But it was, different. It was formative, and I think sometimes I think there are some unhealthy ideas picked up from some of those novels, but compared to popular media that we saw on TV or movies, not only did we center the woman's point of view and pleasure, but she could also instigate it, which we didn't see as much at that time. So that always felt kind of revolutionary about romance writing to me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Women, well, I guess because again, romance, really does center women's stories. They put women at their center. So much literature does not do that. So you get that point of view. You can see and feel the desire and the wants and the drives and the needs. And yeah, women aren't punished for actually going out and you know, getting what they want. They're quite sexually can be quite sexually liberated. Obviously, it depends very much on the story. Maybe it's a slightly different. It depends very much on the character in the story. But I feel like I've always written quite. I mean, I've written 85 books and I've written two virgins. I think two virgins, maybe three. So mostly the women that I write, have had prior sexual experience before you get to the main story, and a lot of them are more than happy to kind of go after what they want. A lot of my books start with like a one night stand, often instigated by the female main character, and yeah, I think that's what I love. I think it's what women who read romance novels love is, yes, I think they really want to, I think they're really into the hero, um, and want to be. I feel like a lot of women picture themselves in the book as a heroine with this, amazing swoony hero. But it's because the hero also centers a woman's pleasure and also, values the woman beyond what they can do, you know, pleasure wise or in bed. That really speaks to kind of what women want, I suppose.
Yeah, and I always one of the things I always find really interesting about how mainstream media looks at women's stories in general, and specifically romance novels. I hate the term mommy porn and
Right.
how derisive people can be about something that women enjoy. And like you said, centers them. Like I find that really telling of how we still view women as a second citizen sort of lens, which
Yeah, right. I mean, books over the centuries, literature has always, we've always had love stories. Romance is no different. Romance is a love story, and it just isn't told through a male lens. It's generally told through a female lens, right? It's generally written by women, not always, but generally, it's mostly published by women, not always, but generally speaking. So it's like to me like this holy trinity. It's like kind of written by women for women, and put out there by women. It's like
yeah.
I know there are people who would say it's not feminist, but I actually kind of disagree. I think putting the women at the center, and making them the masters of their own you know desires, both sexually and otherwise, I think is incredibly feminist.
I think so too. And I think sometimes there can be that term feminist, a lot of people use it in a dirty way as well, which I don't know. And I think there's so much, I don't know. I just like, why can't we just let women enjoy what they enjoy? Like, it doesn't have to be feminist. And I think a lot of women have fantasies that they read about in books that feel very not feminist, but they still have them, especially like ravishment fantasies and a lot of BDSM scenes. Like there's such a range of the kind of scenes you can go and read about in the genre, and it's okay to have those. Like you're not a bad feminist if you like ravishment entertainment. I definitely do, and I'm certainly not published, but I've written a few BDSM short stories that like that's in my imagination. That's what I want to play with. And it doesn't mean that I think women deserve to be harmed or abused. It's like it's a
No,
fantasy.
yeah. I also don't think it means that just because that's what you read or that's what you fantasize about, that you necessarily actually would want that to happen to you in real life either.
Yes.
Like there's a sort of misnomer out there that, oh, women reading all these romance novels, they're going to turn them into, submissives, or they're going to turn them into, whatever depraved thing that somebody thinks, romance novels are about. Women aren't stupid. We can tell the difference between reality and fiction. And even if you want that to happen to you in real life, well, that's if you're not hurting anybody, that's your pleasure, that's your kink, that's your whatever. Then everything's consensual. Um, you know, if men can go out and get it, why, why can't women? I think we should need to stop shaming women for what they like to read and thinking that it's gonna, somehow that we can't tell the difference between like fiction and reality. It's like people sort of, you don't read a bunch of crime novels and then go on to become a murderer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But suddenly if women read a bunch of romance novels, they're going to go on to become insipid, waifs are going to fall over, break their ankle, and wait for a man to rescue them. Like, no, for a start, that's very old school romance anyway. But that's just not the way it is. If you want to tell 500 million women worldwide who read romance that they're, you know, stupid and can't tell the difference between like fiction and reality, then you're a braver person than I am.
Yeah, it's very infantilizing.
Absolutely, absolutely, and just it's look. I've been writing romance for a long time now, and I've pretty much heard it all, and it just becomes so eye rolly, really.
Yeah.
It's really super irritating. But sorry, I digressed there. You asked me a bit about my process for.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
always curious to hear writers talk about their process.
yeah, well, I tend to write on the sexier end of the spectrum. I always have done that. Maybe it's because of those formative years when I was reading quite sexy romance. I'm not sure. I feel like I write contemporary romance. I write romance that's happening, today. And whether you morally think that people should or shouldn't, we all now tend to have sex before we get married or partner up, right? So I feel like I don't have an issue writing really sexy content in a book because I'm writing about a new relationship. And if you're not having a lot of sex in a new relationship, then God help you for the rest of your relationship, right? When things really
Yes.
get tough, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have. To me, um, I I don't have an issue with writing quite heavily sexual content. Now, these days, it's interesting these days because we've got so much dark romance out there now. Like not that long ago, I would have been considered like kind of the spicier end of the spectrum, not erotica, but certainly at the spicier end. Now a lot of people who read me, you see reviews on TikTok or whatever Instagram, and they'll put me. A lot of people rate, romance novels as chili peppers or
Yeah.
1 flame, 2 flame, 3 flames, up to 5 flames, and I'm often put at 2.5 to 3. And it's so interesting because these people are doing that are reading like really, really dark romance with really, really, dark kind of sexual fantasies are sort of, played out. And I just find that that's really amusing. But I don't like set out to say I'm going to write like 5 sex scenes in this book. I do try to concentrate most on the first sex scene because um, that's like a game changer, right? You get two people naked with each other for the first time, and that makes them completely vulnerable to each other, and their relationship can never be the same ever again. After that, it's completely changed. It's and every time every time when they're getting to know each other, it changes and changes. That first time, particularly, is to me really foundational and really important. It's a big moment in a story, and it's nothing for me to write a sex scene that'll go for an entire chapter, like 3, 4, 5,000
I
words,
like
because it's
those.
right, but it's also not about. I think people think that, and like I guess in lots of different stories, maybe that's the case. But I think people think that think about sex scenes, it's just like A going into B, and it's just kind of this bit, right? But to me, sex scenes have never been physical scenes; they've always been emotional scenes. And this gets back again to that first time, right? It's not what's happening physically, not just what's happening physically, but how the physical stuff makes the characters feel emotionally that connects readers to the scene, because a lot of people don't want to read just gratuitous sex for sex sake. They want to feel, you can have people having the most amazing swinging from the chandelier sex, but if people don't care about the characters, then they're actually really not going to be that connected to the scene. So you have to really make an emotional connection through the physical in a sex scene for it to be really, I feel like a really sort of top grade scene. And that takes more words than, and then he fucked her, or, that kind of, and it's over in a
Yeah.
page, right?
Yeah.
You can do that, but to me, especially if the first time when you've built, usually you've built and built and built it. You know, they've kind of done a bit of back and forth thing, and they've almost got there and haven't. And so if you've built the sexual tension, to me, the reader's looking for a payoff. Now, people who read on the sweeter end of the right on the sweeter end of the spectrum will at that stage, you know, probably close the bedroom door. And I feel like there are some great sweet writers out there that do that, and it's, you know, they build up this amazing tension, and you know, it's great. That's what they do. They close the door. I want the door ripped off the hinges. Or I want to see, you built me to that point, and I want to see what's going on, you know, in that situation, because emotionally they're very vulnerable to each other, and you know, you've completely upped the stakes. You know, you've made them vulnerable. Things are never going to be the same ever again. I want to see the emotional impact of that all the way through, and afterwards when they get to that, oh holy shit, what have we just done now? Now we can't go back to the way things were before. Because obviously, in a romance novel, any novel, there's a reason why the two people can't be together, right? So when they've done this thing, it's like a, oh, oops, dear, kind of a moment. What are we going to do now? And so I want to see all of that. I want to be connected emotionally. I don't want just the physical. I want to be connected emotionally to the characters as well throughout the scene.
So do you usually have a like do your characters come first and then that first sex scene, or does it kind of, with that first sex scene being foundational, do they sort of come together as you're sort of developing an idea, or how does that go for you?
It's very different for each book. I remember writing a book once where the characters were going to have, the plan was for the characters to have sex straight up in the first or second chapter. I could not get those two people into bed until chapter 7. I kept saying, guys, it's sex. It's not like root canal. It's going to be fun. Trust me. Come on now, we can do this. And I just couldn't get them to do it. Right. So as much as I wanted to, force those people into that scene, it just wasn't right already for the story yet. So it's very, very, very individual. Usually, I know oftentimes I'll say, okay, I'm going to start this with a one night stand. That's kind of the opening trope of the book. And so that's, reasonably easy to do because, pretty much bang in the first chapter, they're going to be going to be going at it. And that's obviously a very different first scene to like a first scene where there's already been a first sex scene. There's already been a bit of a relationship building. But it also then you can open with a one night stand. But then, so that's obviously the first sex scene. But the next sex scene is actually going to be going to be more important because the first one was just, we're going to do this, we're never going to see each other again. The next one's going to be almost like the first time because there's going to be this realization that, things have
Yeah,
changed.
and I think if you've written that one night stand scene, as you said, emotionally, like then that second time, like something has to have shifted for them to get
Yeah.
to that second time. So yeah, it's like you almost get two first times.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And then of course, like if there's a virgin involved, then that's kind of a different angle. You have to come at. I tend to have like probably 2 to 3, sometimes 4 or 5 sort of sex scenes in a book. Usually, the first one will always be the one with the most description and it'd be the longest sort of scene because again, I'm trying to you know it's a momentous moment in the book. So obviously that requires more work for me. It requires more kind of space to give both characters. And I do dual point of view always. So you usually get, both points of view throughout a scene, whether it be one more point of view all the way through and then afterwards the second character's point of view, or they kind of the scene sort of splits in the middle and then I get flips to the other person's point of view in the middle of it all. Yeah. It just honestly depends on the characters. Sometimes a book will start because I'll have an idea of, some little sexy thing or something that I've read. I'll go, oh, that's a good idea. And what happens then? What if that's, that whole thing when you write it, it's like you can have a kind of a gem of an idea and then the question always is, well, okay, well, what next? What if? What happens if this? Where are they from? Where are they going to? Why can't they be together? All those kind of things. But I do try to have a really kind of intense sort of sexual tension between characters right from the start. Like I say, I write sexy contemporary romance. So to me, I want to have that zing even if it's not acted on for some time, I want to have that kind of zing bubbling along in the background, always, always, or every kind of thought and touch and um, sort of look is sort of just stacked with this sort of sexual tension.
I have a very good friend of mine. Her and I have talked a little bit about erotica and romance, and she wants the sex to be very realistic. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, like I get that. But and I confess many times in my life, I've been the reader where I'm like, I flip through the plot and I'm like, I don't want plot. Like, let's get to the
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have those days and those moments, but I get the desire for a realistic sex scene, but there's sometimes I'm like, I don't care. I realize that this is probably like you couldn't actually physically do this in real life, but I don't care. It's hot. It sounds fun. And what is your take on how much suspension of disbelief readers come into their romance and erotica with?
Well, I guess that depends on each reader, I suppose, doesn't it? I kind of know what you mean. Like, I feel like in romance novels, certainly in the romance novels that I write, and probably in the ones that I read, unless I'm doing it to be for comedic effect, usually the female main character, because I mostly write, female male main characters, so I don't mean to be exclusive, but when I say hero and heroine, it's just because that's mostly what I write. I've only written one male book, so mostly, I've written like female male. Um, and now I've completely lost my track. What was I talking about then?
Uh,
Sorry.
about suspension of disbelief.
Yes. So I mostly my heroines would come pretty much from penetration alone, generally speaking, not always. And I feel like that's pretty unrealistic. I feel like a lot of women don't, orgasm just from penetration alone. And I remember talking to my sister once about that, who is a writer, has written some books as well, but is also like a raging feminist, way, way more than me. And I was like, oh, I kind of feel like that's a bit of a, bit of a misnomer. And I said, how do you think? What do you think about that? She said, no way. She said, I want to read that. I want to read that, about the magic penis that can make, a woman come just from penetration alone, because a lot of women don't get any kind of, any of that sort of in life. So why not give them, they're reading a book, they're going away into a fantasy. Why not give them that? And so ever since then, I've kind of been okay. I've been okay with that. It's also a bit like, writing men with big dicks. I hope I can say this on your channel. I'm assuming I can.
Honey, honey, you can talk about big fucking dicks if you like.
Right. So there's kind of this. I think sometimes men get it put out that every romance hero has got a massive schlong. But I actually wrote a blog once called um, the Mighty Wang. So to me, I'll always write a Mighty Wang, and I have to say that I don't know if it's that unrealistic, because generally speaking, now I was a nurse in a previous life, so I understand anatomy. And so I have seen a lot of penises.
Yep.
And I have to say that just generally speaking, anatomically, if you have a big, tall, broad guy, you're generally going to have, the body is very symmetrical and it's very anatomical, right? So generally speaking, if you have a big, tall guy, they're probably going to be reasonably well endowed, right? And if you have a shorter guy, whatever, probably not. Of course, there are always unicorns, right? You're always going to get a big guy with a small one, and you're going to get a small guy with a big one. Of course, there are exceptions. And so all my heroes are generally tend to be big, tall, broad guys. So I don't think it's that unrealistic for them to have.
My field research concurs.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you for your research. So I don't think that's unrealistic, although I know people grumble about, about that. And maybe it's been unrealistic that this, huge schlong can create an orgasm every single time. But I also actually don't have a problem with that. I feel like, this is a fantasy. These two people are meeting for the first time. They're falling in love. I almost feel like it's kind of more of a metaphor, like it's sort of part of the metaphor of them falling in love as well. That, I think my problem has been, and a lot of readers' problems have been, they don't tend to like is heroines that have had like just terrible, awful, terrible sex for up until the point they meet the hero, and then chinga, everything's great. So I try to write heroines that actually had that. In the past, when I first started, I probably did that, but become more aware over the years and write heroines that actually have been perfectly sexually fulfilled
Yeah.
prior to that. They don't necessarily had bad sex, but this is just this extra, sort of special
Yeah.
guy that just can push all the right buttons and can totally get it there every single time. And I actually have zero problems with that. Like down the track, it's going to be different in a long term relationship, right? But in the beginning, I feel like you know, I feel like everything else, and particularly in a romance when things are rocky, you never know, are they going to, of course, they're going to get together because that's what a romance is, but, it's very back and forth and you can be very worried about, kind of their way to the happily ever after. But the fact that they have this kind of one area where they completely connect, for me, I like to write that. I like to read that too.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're talking magical penises, I find the magical penis where she's never had great sex and all of a sudden that kind of that resonates a little bit less with me, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there are people who love that, right? So I don't know. I think my very favorite thing about the entire genre is you can get any kind you want. Like if you, I think I in my email to you, I was like, I kind of like werewolf romance, which is like ridiculous. In some ways, I'm like, it's so ridiculous, but there's something about it. I'm like, I like it. It resonates. I like a lot of some more hardcore stuff. And then sometimes I'm like, just give me like a gentle, slow, slow burn romance. Like I like those too. And I think it's really great that we have kind of sexual entertainment for everybody. Romance entertainment.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
even in the last few years, it's become like, paranormal's kind of comes and goes as far as pardon the pun, as far as our popularity. Shifter romance can kind of comes in and out of popularity as well, but that's always been quite popular, and that sort of those characters tend to have the magical wang as well. Um, and it's just a bit, again, it gets back to women's fantasies, right? It's like you're perfectly entitled to you know get off on whatever it is that sort of your. But
Yep.
now we also have like there's like alien stuff out there. There's like tentacle stuff out there. There is. I read one about which has been hugely popular about I'm not going to remember it now, but like monster romance is huge as well. It's like the more it goes on, the more the world expands into this. You can literally kind of get whatever you want these days, which is, I think that's great. I think that's really great that there's something out there for everybody. I mean, gosh, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think, yeah, it's fantastic that everybody can go just and often for free. There's a lot of great free stuff out there too. A lot of
Yeah,
stuff at the library, and I think it's great that everybody. I know readers of romance are mostly women, but I think it's great that every woman can go find something that fits her own personal fantasy and can really sort of like help her flourish into her, pleasure and erotic life. I think that's only a good thing, and that's why I do the work I do as well. It's like women should have all the pleasure available to them that men have historically always had. So I think allowing women to have that outlet is really important.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just just I don't know. People be people, I know, but I just find it crazy that there's so much commentary, about this and what are we going to do about these women who like to, read monster romance. Well, just leave us alone. We're
Yeah.
fine. We're not
How
gonna.
about
We don't really think there's a green alien up there that's going to beam us up, and it's fine. We're fine. We're probably in the middle of doing 1,000 things, like juggling a million things, like most women do. Um, you know, it's fine. We're fine. Give us this. Just give us. Don't get into our. Surely we can have some space in our own heads where we can, where we can enjoy whatever we enjoy. But again, I stress for me that romance is not about. It's not about the sex. It's about the love, right? The
yeah.
sex can be great in it as well, should be great in it as well, and can be amazing and whatever. But romance novels are about the love. it's not, if it doesn't end happily ever after, it's not a romance novel. So it's about that relationship ending in, or happy for now.
Yeah.
You know, if you have this amazing kind of relationship in a book and they don't get together, or one of them dies or something, not a romance. That's like no. So people read romance for that, for the love, and if sex is great, if that's what they're into, then that's, you know, just this like kind of added bonus, really.
And I think there's something really, especially since COVID, we live in times where a lot of people are struggling with mental health and anxiety, or maybe it's more that it's in the open, but there's something really soothing about going to a romance and knowing that you're going to have that happy ending. Like, that's one of the reasons why I decided to pick it up. I like, generally, like you said, that it's gonna be a happy ending. You can pick the genre that you like, and I think that that's really soothing. And, love or hate 50 Shades of Grey, I think that was a really great book in terms of really putting the spotlight onto women's desires and really women's fantasies and recognizing what a huge, powerful demographic women are. So I thought that was really great. And
Yeah, sorry, go.
my favorite little sidebar about 50 Shades of Grey, it was shot in Vancouver, and my
Oh,
friend, we used to work in the movies, and my friend worked on that movie, and she knew I was, moving towards being a sex coach. She came over one day. She's like, "Well, Jen," she's like, "the prop guys came in the office at Wrap, and she's like, they just dropped a box on her desk and walked away." So she gave it over to me. It was like all the like a whole bunch of unopened sex toys and things that they had just, like, never made it on screen, but had sort of like you
oh
can't give.
wow,
And I was like, "Okay." So,
that's very cool. I like that. That's a
that
great
was,
story.
yeah, that was really funny. That was really great. So there's some, like, high quality stuff in there. Yeah.
Wow. Well, look, I know 50 Shades of Grey has copped lots and lots of, you know, flack over what has it been, a decade or more since it's sort of was published. But it's actually a really inspirational story how it got published and how it got become such a phenomenon, which I think kind of gets overlooked in everything. Maybe because the person who wrote it was a woman. I don't know. But I don't know if you know this, but 50 Shades of Grey started off as Twilight fanfic.
Yes, yes, I did know that.
But it started off as this online serial that she wrote called Masters of the Universe. And Mr. Grey is, you know, essentially Edward, and Bella is essentially, Anna
Anna.
is Bella, right? So, so it became really, really, really popular online. Had quite a big following, and an Australian, actually small book publisher, like a digital publisher, said sort of approached her and said, we can make this into a digital book if you like. And so she said, yep. And so it got made into a digital book. And that became really, you know, obviously people who listen to the serial, like reading the serial, read the book, and it just kind of became like a big online phenomenon. And that's when Random House bought the rights and made it into a book, and then became the movies, and then made millions of dollars. And like, I'm like, good on you. Like
Yeah,
you took this fanfic, little fanfic serial, and you made it into this like mega mega huge thing, and you're a woman, and if you're a man you'd be like being lauded from like left, right and center. Wouldn't have anybody like judging you about it. And I just think it's the most inspirational story. Apparently the year 50 Shades came out, I don't know if it was that year or the year after, every person in Random House, the publishing company, got paid a bonus, and bonuses hadn't been paid in publishing for a long time, of $5,000. Everyone from the person who cleaned the floors in the workshop, in the, you know, in the distribution centers, up to the boss, because of the money that that book
yeah,
generated for the company. And I think that's amazing. And also, I know it's a bit like, you know, Harry Potter got a lot of kids reading. That was kind of the book that like a lot of kids sort of that hadn't been readers started to read. 50 Shades of Grey was like that for a lot of women, and a lot of, well, not just women read it, but also men. It's, I know people who, and I've listened to people talk about it. I didn't read, I wasn't much of a reader, I wasn't interested, and I read 50 Shades of Grey, and now I read all the time. Now I cannot get enough of reading, and I just think, well, wow, that's pretty amazing too,
yeah,
right?
that's hugely powerful, and that's Yeah, going back to what I said before about the power of the female demographic, I think that it's often underlooked until something massive like this happens. And, you think of that, the series, and it did have that happy ending. And there was like all the books, like they had that, tumultuous, like she had the barrier to why they couldn't be together. And the kink was new to a lot of people. Like
Absolutely.
she really hit on something, and she sparked so many women's imaginations, like, and credit to her for that. And I think you're very right that had this happened to a man, she wouldn't have gotten nearly as much vitriol as she did, which was
Mm.
really
And I
kind
mean,
of.
I guess she's probably, crying into her checks, not.
Oh, I'm sure
Um,
she is.
yeah, right. I'm sure she's like, good luck to her, and at least I'm sure she does not give a rat's ass about, the 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 vitriol and playing into all of that. I know that a lot of people that I think she also started this groundswell. I think Fifty Shades of Grey was the beginning of this whole different groundswell in publishing in women's romance fiction. That sort of shifted the dynamic really, because she was kind of essentially self-published to start with, and so that kind of sort of hit the zeitgeist around the same time self-publishing was going big, and it also opened the doors to lots of kind of kink in romance. Now, from what I understand from people who are in the BDSM community, they say that Fifty Shades of Grey books are actually quite vanilla as far as kind of kink goes, right? But it kind of opened those doors, and it started, and it started a sort of a trend, not to say trend, but there's this whole kind of subgenre now of romantic fiction that deals with BDSM, and you can get anything from light black kink all the way to like you know whatever you kind of want, and that's a good thing as well. I've written one book with kink in it, um, but because I was like, I'm not. I mean, I quite like to read BDSM books, but it's not something that I particularly fantasize about. But I kind of thought I could write, because I tend to write. I have a bit of a comedic voice, so I tend to write a bit funny in most of my books anyway. And I wrote this book called Hanky Spanky Christmas, and I wanted to write a story. Okay, it's interesting how this sort of sex scenes involved in this book. Was a novella about a woman who thought she wanted to be spanked, but actually, when it came around to getting spanked, she actually realized, nope, it hurt too much, and she absolutely did not want to get spanked. But it was the lead up to that and how it happened, and she sort of said to the guy next door, who she kind of always had a crush on, it kind of been like vibing back and forth, but nothing had ever happened. I want to be spanked. I want you to do it. And he's like, I don't think you want to be spanked. She's like, I do, I do, I do. And then it turns out that actually she doesn't, and they end up having amazing sex anyway. Um, so probably with that 50 Shades of Grey, I wouldn't have kind of thought to write, any kind of kink at all. So there's an amazing Australian writer called Eve Dangerfield. She lives in Melbourne, and she writes amazing, amazing kink. Her books are like just funny and sexy and kinky, and thanks to 50 Shades of Grey, there's an audience now, I think, out there for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I also went off in a bit of a different direction. You mentioned earlier true crime, and I think it's really, and we're talking about BDSM, so that's why my brain went there. I think it's really fascinating how so many women, I mean, it's mostly women who are, buying romance, reading romance and erotica. And also, they're the largest demographic that is into true crime, which I find really, really
Mm,
fascinating.
yeah. Well, women are just the largest readers. Women read many more books than men do, anyway. So they're always the largest reader in any demographic. And they're oftentimes the people that will buy books for their male partners or their male relatives, whatever, to read also. So I know I do that for my husband. When we were first married, I realized I don't know what we've been doing for 4 years, but I realized that when I suggested he read a book, he was like, "Oh, I don't read," and I was like, "What? No, I'm not going to be married to anybody who doesn't read. So you have to sort that out." And then he started to read like science. He was not very into English at school, and he was made to read Shakespeare. So he had a very bad experience at school, like a lot of people do, but I think particularly guys, where they're forced to read stuff that they don't want to read, and it really puts them off reading. And he was that kind of guy, right? And when he found his niche, so he fell into like quite hardcore science fiction. He doesn't read science fiction; has got a remote bit of fantasy, and he's not interested. He's very hardcore. And then he just wrote books, read books and books and books and books and books of it. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, reading is very. I don't know how we've gotten that off on that track, but yeah, if it had not been for me saying
Yeah.
to him, "Yeah, you need to read a book," he probably still might not have,
Yeah. I used to teach grade 3, and even with 8-year-olds, it was always a challenge to get boys to read more than it was for girls, and we have so many talks about it with my colleagues in staff meetings, and I don't know that we just haven't hit on, like, high interest, like, obviously lower level for your 8-year-old boys, the content that they want, but I don't know, it was always more difficult to get them interested in reading, which
Yeah,
is
I think it's a perennial problem,
yeah.
really. So, yeah. I guess Harry Potter game was the sort of thing that changed that for a lot of boys. That's why I sort of mentioned it because it became that book that sort of opened the doors. I think it's about being open to, like, my son. We obviously read to my son, every night like you do and all day, but he wasn't much of a reader either. But he loved to read. He loved Guinness World Book of Records, and
Mm,
so I was just buy a Guinness Book. I was like, I don't care what you read, like as long as you're reading. I think that's the thing. I think there's this, if you have to read something, super high quality or super literary or super, well, no. Reading is reading. Read what you enjoy, which goes the same goes for romance, right? And erotica and that sort of thing. Read what you enjoy. Who cares? Who cares what the world thinks?
yeah.
I actually want
Um,
to ask you, Jen, if
yeah,
I can. I'm actually
absolutely.
just about to finish a book. Hopefully today will be the last day. Hopefully I'll finish it today. But the heroine in that book um, has had a bit of a um, mental health episode, and she's on some antidepressant medication, and she can't orgasm
Mm.
because she's on it. And I know that that can be a symptom and side effect of antidepressant medication. And so we were talking before about how I like to have the magical wang and all of that kind of thing. But this guy's wang, no matter how magical, can do nothing for her because she just can't get there. She just can't get across the line. And like in the very first time they have sex, she actually ends up faking it because she's just like, "Oh my god, this guy's really nice. It's great to have sex. He's really good at it. I'm just gonna get there." And so she actually fakes it, so he doesn't even know that she's not kind of had an orgasm, which kind of plays into a bit of comedy sort of along the way as well. But I just want to ask you about sort of the realism behind that and your experience. Have you had people that have come to you and said, I literally can't get there because I'm on this medication, and what you might
I
suggest?
Yeah, I know that a lot of medications can interfere with pleasure. That isn't my area of expertise. I haven't worked with a lot of clients that have been on medications. But what I can tell you is that I love to go to happy hour and have a glass of wine and just strike up sexy conversations with whoever's around me. And a lot of women open up to strangers sitting up at the bar. And so I've had numerous women who I've just met tell me that they can't orgasm. And they usually haven't said if it's because of, mental health issue or medication. But my first question to them is always, do you masturbate?
Mm,
And almost every time they say no. And I think one of the really key teachings that we are missing in our culture around female pleasure is that it's okay for women to self pleasure. And not only is it okay, it is such a vital skill to learning what you like yourself. Because how can you tell a partner if you don't know? And I think
mm,
that's really key, and that informs, a lot of my work as well, just helping women, um, find that pleasure, and if they're not comfortable masturbating, like I mentioned to you, off camera, I teach women how to have touchless orgasms.
mm. Yes, because I was thinking about this hero, and I was like, "Oh." sounds like I need to pick your brains about touchless orgasm for this character.
Yeah, it's so my personal experience with it was I started back in my 20s and it didn't happen very often, but I would have orgasms in my sleep that would wake me up and I had no context for it because in all the sexual education I received, we learned about men and boys having wet dreams, but there was completely absent that this could happen to women. So, what is this? My friends hadn't experienced it. And I kind of put it away and just forgot about it. And then as I got into my coaching training and we started doing a lot of somatic pleasure work in the body, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that I was able to do this. And it blows
Mm,
my mind that you can create an orgasm for yourself with the power of your mind. And
mhm,
I had went to a women's retreat as part of my training. So there was 80 women in the room. So there's definitely like that energy I find can really help you connect with your pleasure sometimes. But there were two times in our sessions, if I had 10 more minutes, I would have had an orgasm in the and other women around me were having them too. Like it was happening for a lot of people. And I went, oh my God, like now I have the tools to do this. And when I got home, I was a little bit nervous. I thought, can I do this by myself in the privacy of my own home? And you can replicate it and it can be taught. And I think something that we don't really think about is that pleasure is a skill, sex is a skill, and it
mm,
responds very well to consistent practice. So if you want to increase the pleasure that you're having, you want to have stronger orgasms or different type of orgasms, if you sit down and devote time to it, it doesn't have to be a ridiculous amount of time, like 10 minutes 3 times a week can help. You can create new pleasure experiences and pathways in your body, which clearly it lights me up and it gets me going because I think it's the most powerful thing in the world that a woman can do. So,
yeah,
yeah.
amazing. I feel like I might have to, when I'm editing this book, like slip something like that into in between the pages about power of the mind, because my character can't even get herself over the line. She's pretty uptight about, like, obviously the longer it goes on, the more uptight she is about it. So of course she can't. But he does. We do have a satisfying. We get there in the end. So that's good. He's horrified to realize that she faked it the first time, and
Yeah.
so then he's determined to make to try and help her get there. So and that's sort of part of the development of their sort of you know sexual relationship, but also their emotional journey as well.
And sometimes legal Canadian weed can help.
It's not legal here in Australia, but we
Oh,
get
that's tough. Yeah, I miss
I,
sleeping weed, but yeah, sometimes plant medicine can help people. Like I know for women too, there's a lot of. I'm sure you've experienced it. I've experienced it. There can be a lot of thinking going on, and there's an inner critic, and that's one of the keys to touchless orgasm too, and to pleasure in general. Is if you're up here thinking, you're not in your body and you're not experiencing everything
yeah,
and pleasure wise. So for a lot of women, it's figuring out how to get out of the brain and get into the
yes,
body. Sometimes plant
yeah.
medicine is a bit of a boost
Yeah,
to the
I think for this heroine, that's very much her. She's very in her head about it all the time. She can kind of get, she can sort of get on the wave as it starts, and then she's like completely sidetracks herself with like thoughts, and it kind of goes away, and she can't kind of catch it again. So, um, yeah, I'm be interesting to see how she's received. But I like that also about romance novels is that um, I like reading romance novels like the sex that's also getting back to your friend. That's also a little bit realistic, where you kind of like clash teeth and you bump heads and you get your bra caught in your hair, and
oh,
that's great for comedic effect. I kind of like that. And there's a great American writer called Jennifer Cruzy who writes amazing bad sex in that it doesn't ever quite fire off properly and it doesn't ever really happen in that kind of first or second kind of times, but it's kind of funny, and of course it's funny because they're both okay with it and they can laugh at it, and but I actually like those kind of scenes too because that's also very, as far as that kind of realism goes, I really like that because as
yeah.
like again like my heroine who had to fake it because she just can't have an orgasm. um I do like that kind of realism, as well. Depends very much on the book, obviously, and the set of circumstances. But I think seeing those kind of things in books for women also is very informative, because it's, there are books that say, sometimes it's hard to get there, or sometimes, you're going to bang heads and it's just going to completely derail the entire, event, and it's not going to work for you that time. And you know, that's part of it as well. That's okay too.
Yeah, and our bodies, like, we're not machines. Sometimes they don't do what we want when we want. Sometimes they do things when we don't want them to. And
Yeah.
two bodies coming together, absolutely. We've all had an experience or two where, there's been a mishap. I know I've had a couple moments where I've absolutely been cracking up because it's just going so badly. Um, but that's life, right? You regroup and you talk about it and you move on, right? So I like those scenes too. I think it's important that that everything is presented, that we have a wide array of
And also,
experience.
I think in the context of a romance novel, the fact that there's, a bit of a disastrous, sex scene, or, it didn't quite make it sex scene. The fact that the two characters go back for more, it shows the commitment. It shows actually that they're interested more than sex. It's not about that. Actually, they're really into this person. And, so that can be a great way to demonstrate that, it's not about sex. It's actually about the love and the relationship in the building. And, I think that's a great way to show um, characters' commitment to the relationship developing as well.
100%. So to wrap this up,
Yes.
ask you to recommend to everybody watching a book of yours that's a favorite and something you would recommend others, not your book, to read. I know
Okay.
you mentioned a couple authors along the way, and we'll put those in the description box too. But you're
Yes. I mentioned Eve Dangerfield. She's an Australian author, so she writes great, sexy stuff with some kink in, funny. I have got a perma-free book out, so people can try me for free. Obviously, they can sign up to my newsletter and they get that free novella that you talked about, Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Red Bikini Trouble. I have another book called Some Girls Do, and it's just been recovered, actually. It's got a lovely new hot cover on it, and it's perma-free. Like, you can pick it up on any um, digital platform, and it's there's an age gap romance going in there, sort of friends to lovers, forced proximity. There's a fake baby, fake pregnancy, and it's kind of humorous as well. I love that book, and I think it's actually the first book in a series of 4, but you can get them on for free. So Some Girls Do. Okay, another recommendation. Now let me think. Well, I would always recommend Jennifer Cruzy, who I've just mentioned about, who can write really great, disastrous sex scenes. She's actually had a bit of a hiatus from writing for quite some time, but she's back writing again now, which is amazing. And she does really, really great. She writes great humor and sort of great sex scenes as well. Um, um, I can email. I'm being put on the spot. I'll email you some others that you can mention in the notes or something like that. I can't think off the top of my head. Yeah, but like, you can find anything that you want and go onto Amazon and type in your kink or your whatever, your
yeah.
BNM or your BDSM, and you'll find a plethora of books out there. Also, all my books are obviously on my website, so people can go and check out that as well.
Okay. Beautiful. So we'll link all of that below so people can find all those delicious books. I'll also link to my website below. So for anyone who's interested in touchless orgasm, the next round starts on April 24th, and I do have some discounts happening. So I'll put that all in the description box. And thank you so much for the chat, Amy, and thanks to everybody for watching. It was a delight to have this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. I think we should be talking more about normalizing women's pleasure. So thank you for the opportunity to do
So thanks so much.
that. Okay, bye.
So one last little postscript from Amy she wanted to share with you, so I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I forgot to mention, which was a bit silly of me, that myself and three other romance authors, we run the How to Write Academy, which runs writing courses. We have a couple of courses in our portfolio at the moment, and we're developing more. One is How to Write Love, and one is How to self-publish and sell. So I just wanted to mention, because we're talking about, love and sex scenes and orgasms, that in the How to Write Love course, I do a whole module that talks about writing sex scenes, about the emotional, the physical, and all the stuff that goes along with how to write really deeply engaging sex scenes. So if anybody out there is actually interested in writing romance, or dabbling in, erotica, or dabbling in short stories, whatever, yeah, you can. This course is well, if you're writing at all, it's pretty amazing, so, for any genre. But yeah, check it out, and Jen will put a little link in the notes, and yeah, hopefully, if that's for you, then I've got you covered.
Yeah, sounds great. So hope everybody checks that out.
Super. Thank you.